The gun slipped from Eleanor Hartford's trembling fingers and clattered onto the wooden porch of her father's ranch house, the metallic sound echoing across the dusty Wyoming plains like a death knell for everything she had once been. It was the summer of 1878, and the heat bore down on the territory with relentless fury, turning the earth to powder and the sky to burnished copper. Eleanor stared at her hands as they shook uncontrollably. The tremors that had started 3 months ago after the accident, now a constant companion, a betrayal of flesh and nerve that had stolen her identity as surely as a thief in the night. She had been the best shot in Carbon County, maybe in all of Wyoming Territory. Men had traveled from as far as Cheyenne to see Eleanor Hartford put 6 bullets through 6 silver dollars tossed in the air. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, and by the time she turned 18, she could outshoot any man who dared challenge her. Now, at 23, she could barely hold a coffee cup without spilling it. The accident had happened in April, when her horse had spooked during a spring storm and thrown her hard against the canyon rocks near Separation Creek. She had hit her head, been unconscious for 2 days, and when she finally woke, the tremors had already begun. The doctor and Rollins said it might be permanent, that something in her brain had been damaged, that she should be grateful to be alive at all. But Eleanor did not feel grateful. She felt hollow, carved out, like someone had reached inside and removed the essential part of her that made her who she was. Her father's ranch, the Hartford Spread, sat on 3,000 acres of grazing land where cattle moved like brown rivers across the golden grass. It was a prosperous operation, but prosperity in Wyoming Territory came with a price. Rustlers, claim jumpers, and desperate men fleeing the law all found their way to these remote places, and a rancher needed to be able to defend what was his. Eleanor's mother had died of cholera when Eleanor was 12, and her father, Thomas Hartford, had raised her alone, teaching her everything he knew about running a ranch and surviving in hard country. The shooting skills had been part of that survival, but they had become more than that. They had become her art, her pride, her proof that she was more than just a woman in a world that constantly tried to diminish her. The sun was beginning its descent toward the Wind River Range when Eleanor heard the rider approaching. She looked up from where she sat on the porch steps, her useless hands clasped in her lap, and watched as a lone horseman emerged from the heat shimmer on the eastern road. He rode easily, his body moving with the rhythm of his mount, and even from a distance, Eleanor could see he was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his own capabilities. The rider drew closer, and Eleanor could make out more details. He wore a dark hat pulled low against the sun, a dusty brown shirt, and worn leather chaps that had seen hard use. A Colt revolver sat on his right hip, and a rifle was secured in a scabbard on his saddle. His horse was a sturdy buckskin gelding that looked like it could run all day without complaint. When he reached the front yard, he reined in and tipped his hat to Eleanor, revealing a face that was lean and weathered, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a mouth that looked like it smiled rarely, but genuinely when it did. "Afternoon," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried easily in the still air. "This the Hartford place?" "It is," Eleanor replied, standing up slowly, willing her hands to be still, but feeling them tremble against her sides. "What is your business here?" "Name is Cole Garrett," the man said, swinging down from his horse with easy grace. "I heard in town that Thomas Hartford might be hiring. I am looking for work." Eleanor studied him carefully. Cole Garrett looked to be in his late 20s, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors, facing wind and sun and all the hardships the frontier could offer. There was something steady about him, something that suggested reliability in a world where that quality was rare and valuable. "My father is out checking the north pasture," Eleanor said. "He will not be back until dark, but yes, we are hiring. We lost 3 men this spring. One moved on to the Montana gold fields, one got married and started his own homestead, and one—" She paused, her voice catching slightly. "One died in the same accident that injured me." Cole's gray eyes sharpened with interest, but not the prurient kind. It was the look of someone genuinely concerned. "I am sorry to hear that. Are you recovered now?" Eleanor laughed, but there was no humor in it. She held up her hands, letting him see the tremors that ran through them like current through telegraph wires. "This is as recovered as I am going to get, according to the doctors. My hands shake too much to shoot anymore." She said it flatly without self-pity, but Cole could hear the world of loss contained in those simple words. He was quiet for a moment, looking at her hands, then at her face. Eleanor Hartford was beautiful in the way of frontier women, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that she wore in a practical braid, and hazel eyes that held depths of intelligence and determination. But there was also pain in those eyes, fresh and raw, the kind that came from losing something essential to one's sense of self. "Then I'll be your aim," Cole said quietly. Eleanor blinked, startled. "What?" "If your hands shake too much to shoot, then I will be your aim," Cole repeated, his voice steady and sure. "Whatever needs shooting on this ranch, whatever needs protecting, I will do it. You can tell me what needs to be done, where the shots need to land, and I will make it happen. Your knowledge and my hands, partnership." Eleanor stared at him, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It was not pity she heard in his voice, which she would have rejected instantly. It was respect, an acknowledgement of what she had lost, but also an offer to help her remain relevant, useful, still part of the life she had always known. No one else had offered her that. Everyone else had simply told her to accept her new limitations, to find other ways to be useful, to reconcile herself to a diminished existence. "You do not even know if my father will hire you," Eleanor said, but her voice had softened. "True enough," Cole acknowledged with a slight smile that transformed his stern face into something warmer. "But if he does, the offer stands. I have been working ranches and driving cattle since I was 15 years old. I am a good shot, but I am not prideful about it. If you have the knowledge and the eye for it, I see no reason we could not work together." Before Eleanor could respond, her father came riding in from the north, his horse kicking up dust as he urged it into a canter at the sight of the stranger in his yard. Thomas Hartford was 60 years old, with iron-gray hair and a beard to match, and the kind of solid, powerful build that came from a lifetime of physical labor. He rode up to Cole and Eleanor, his hand resting casually near his gun, his eyes assessing the younger man with the practiced gaze of someone who had spent decades judging character quickly and accurately. "Who are you?" Thomas asked bluntly. "Cole Garrett, sir. I am looking for ranch work. I heard in Rawlins that you might be hiring." Thomas dismounted, moving with the slight stiffness of a man whose joints had been battered by too many years of hard living. He looked Cole up and down, taking in the well-maintained gear, the calm demeanor, the capable hands. "What is your experience?" "I grew up on a ranch outside Abilene, Kansas," Cole said. "Worked there until I was 20, then hired on with a cattle drive up to Montana. I have been working ranches in Montana and Wyoming for the past 7 years. I can handle cattle, break horses, mend fences, and I know my way around firearms. I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble away my wages, and I show up for work when I say I will." "Why did you leave your last position?" Thomas asked, the question sharp and probing. "The ranch was sold to a big outfit out of Chicago," Cole explained. "They brought in their own foreman and crew. Nothing personal, just business. I have references if you want them." Thomas nodded slowly. "I might take you up on that. We run about 800 head of cattle here, and we are planning to expand. I need men who can work hard and who I can trust. There are rustlers operating in this territory, and I have lost too many head this year already. A man who works for me needs to be willing to defend the herd and the property." "I understand," Cole said simply. Thomas looked at his daughter, who was watching the exchange with more interest than she had shown in anything for weeks. He had been worried about Eleanor, watching her retreat into herself after the accident, seeing the light go out of her eyes as she confronted a future that looked nothing like the one she had imagined. Whatever this stranger had said to her in the few minutes before Thomas arrived, it had sparked something in her, brought some color back to her cheeks, and for that alone, Thomas was inclined to give the man a chance. "I will pay you $30 a month, plus room and board," Thomas said. "You will bunk in the ranch house with the other hands. We eat breakfast at 5 in the morning, and the day ends when the work is done. Sundays you get half a day off for church if you are inclined, or to do as you please if you are not. You will start tomorrow if you want the job." "I want it," Cole said, extending his hand. "Thank you, sir." Thomas shook his hand firmly, then gestured toward the barn. "Put your horse up for the night. We will have supper in an hour. Eleanor will show you where everything is." As Thomas headed into the house, Cole gathered his horse's reins and looked at Eleanor. She met his eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Then she nodded and started toward the barn, her steps sure despite the trembling of her hands. "The barn is well organized," Eleanor said as they walked. My father is particular about things being in their proper place. The stalls are on the left, feed is stored in the back, and tack hangs on the right wall. Your horse looks like he has been ridden hard today." "We came from Laramie," Cole said. "It is a long ride." "That is more than 100 miles, Eleanor said, surprised. "You rode that in 2 days?" "Day and a half," Cole corrected. "I was eager to find work." They reached the barn, and Eleanor pushed open the wide doors, revealing a clean, well-maintained interior that smelled of hay and horses and leather. Cole led his buckskin to an empty stall and began unsaddling him, his movements efficient and practiced. Eleanor watched, noticing the gentle way he handled the animal, the soft words he murmured as he worked. There was kindness in him, she realized, a gentleness that contrasted with the hardness required to survive in this country. "What you said earlier," Eleanor began, then paused, unsure how to continue. Cole looked up from brushing his horse. "About being your aim?" "Yes." "Did you mean it, or were you just being kind?" Cole set down the brush and turned to face her fully. "I never say things I do not mean, Miss Hartford. It seems to me that you know this ranch and this country better than I ever will. You have the knowledge and the instinct that come from growing up here. Just because your hands shake does not mean your mind has forgotten how to shoot, where to aim, how to read a situation. If we were to work together, you could guide me, and I could execute. It would be foolish of me not to take advantage of your expertise." Eleanor felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Most men would not want to take direction from a woman. Most men are fools," Cole said simply, and this time his smile was full and genuine, transforming his face into something that made Eleanor's heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with her injury. They stood there in the barn, the golden afternoon light slanting through the gaps in the wood, dust motes dancing in the air between them, and Eleanor felt the world shift slightly on its axis. She had thought her life was over, that everything worth having had been taken from her in that terrible fall. But standing here with this stranger, who saw her not as broken, but as still capable, still valuable, she felt the first stirrings of something she had not felt in months. Hope. Supper that evening was a lively affair. The other ranch hands, Charlie and Ben, were curious about the new hire and peppered Cole with questions about where he had worked and what he had seen. Cole answered easily, telling stories about cattle drives and Montana winters, and a grizzly bear he had encountered near the Yellowstone River. He was a good storyteller, Eleanor noticed, with a dry sense of humor that had even her father chuckling. After the meal, as the men sat on the porch smoking and talking, Eleanor retreated to her room. It was a simple space, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk for her clothes, and a small desk where she kept her journals. She sat at the desk and pulled out the leather-bound book where she had been recording her thoughts since the accident. Most of the entries were dark, full of despair and self-pity and rage at the unfairness of fate. But tonight she wrote something different. "A man came to the ranch today. His name is Cole Garrett. He said something that no one else has said. He offered not to fix me or pity me, but to work with me, to be my aim while I provide the knowledge. I do not know if it will work, but for the first time since the accident, I feel like maybe there is a future for me after all." Cole started work the next morning, rising before dawn with the other hands and heading out to check the cattle in the east pasture. He worked hard. Eleanor could see that from watching him through the window as she helped prepare breakfast. He sat his horse well, moved cattle with quiet efficiency, and seemed to have an instinctive understanding of how to work with the animals rather than against them. Over the next few weeks, Cole proved himself to be everything he had claimed. He was reliable, hard-working, and skilled at every task Thomas set him. But what surprised Eleanor most was that he had not forgotten his promise to her. Whenever there was shooting to be done, whether it was putting down a lame horse or scaring off coyotes that were harassing the herd, Cole would seek out Eleanor first. "What is the situation?" he would ask, and Eleanor would assess the circumstances, calculate the distance, consider the wind and the light and all the variables that went into making a good shot. Then she would tell Cole what to do, where to aim, how to adjust, and he would follow her instructions exactly. At first it felt strange, like speaking through a translator, but gradually it became natural, a partnership that felt as seamless as if her hands were steady and she were pulling the trigger herself. One afternoon in late July, a rider came tearing into the ranch yard, his horse lathered with sweat. It was Ben, one of the hands, and his face was pale with urgency. "Rustlers!" he shouted as he dismounted. They are hitting the north herd, trying to cut out about 50 head and drive them toward the canyon. Thomas was in the barn, and he came running out at the commotion. How many? I counted 4, maybe 5, Ben said, breathing hard. They are armed and they mean business. Thomas looked at his remaining hands. Charlie was in town getting supplies. That left him, Cole, Ben, and Eleanor, except Eleanor could not shoot. Thomas's face was grim as he calculated the odds. I am coming, Eleanor said, her voice firm. Eleanor, you cannot, Thomas began, but she cut him off. I can ride, and I can see, and I can think, Eleanor said sharply. Cole will be my aim. We have been practicing for weeks. Trust us, Father. Thomas looked at Cole, who nodded once, his gray eyes steady and sure. She is right, sir. We can do this. Thomas made a decision. All right, saddle up. We ride in 5 minutes. The ride to the north pasture was hard and fast, with the horses stretching out into a full gallop across the open range. Eleanor rode her mare, a swift little chestnut that had always been sure-footed and brave. Cole rode beside her, close enough that they could communicate without shouting. The trembling in Eleanor's hands was worse from the adrenaline, but her mind was sharp and clear, already calculating angles and strategies. They reached the ridge overlooking the north pasture and reined in. Below them, Eleanor could see the rustlers, 5 men on horseback, working to cut a group of cattle away from the main herd. They were moving quickly, efficiently, clearly experienced at this kind of work. 2 of them were already driving the stolen cattle toward the mouth of Copper Canyon, while the other 3 kept watch. We need to stop them before they get into the canyon, Eleanor said, her voice low and urgent. Once they are in there, we will never catch them. The canyon has too many side passages. What is the plan? Cole asked, his hand already on his rifle. Eleanor studied the scene below, her mind working through the possibilities. Father, you and Ben swing wide to the east and come at them from that side. It will force them to turn back toward us. Cole and I will position ourselves on this ridge. We have the high ground and the better angle. When they turn, we take out their lead riders. Without leadership, the others might scatter. Thomas looked at his daughter, seeing in her the tactical mind that had always been there, the sharp intelligence that made her such a formidable shot. All right, but Eleanor, if this goes wrong, it will not go wrong, Eleanor said firmly. Trust me, trust us. Thomas nodded and gestured to Ben. The 2 of them rode off to the east, circling wide to stay out of sight. Eleanor and Cole dismounted and moved to the edge of the ridge, where a tumble of rocks provided cover. Cole pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked the load, then settled into position. Tell me what you see, Cole said quietly. Eleanor focused on the rustlers below, her eyes tracking their movements, calculating distances and trajectories. The man on the gray horse is the leader. He is directing the others. He is about 200 yards out. There is a slight wind from the west, maybe 5 miles per hour. You will need to adjust your aim about 6 inches to the right to compensate. Cole made the adjustment, settling the rifle stock against his shoulder. Ready? Not yet, Eleanor said, watching the scene unfold. Wait until my father makes his move. We need them to turn toward us first. They waited, the sun beating down on them, the sounds of the cattle and the rustlers drifting up from below. Eleanor could feel her heart pounding, the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with danger. Her hands were shaking badly now, but it did not matter. Cole's hands were steady, and he was waiting for her command. Suddenly, Thomas and Ben burst from cover to the east, galloping hard toward the rustlers and firing their weapons into the air. The rustlers shouted in surprise and confusion. The leader, the man on the gray horse, wheeled around to assess the threat, and in doing so, turned directly toward the ridge where Eleanor and Cole waited. Now, Eleanor said, take the leader, aim for center mass. Cole squeezed the trigger smoothly, and the rifle cracked loud in the still air. The rustler leader jerked in his saddle and toppled to the ground. The other rustlers immediately panicked, unsure where the shot had come from. One of them started to raise his own rifle, scanning the ridge. The man on the bay horse, Eleanor said urgently. He's trying to locate us, 220 yards. Adjust 8 inches right and 2 inches high. Cole worked the lever action, chambered a new round, made the adjustments, and fired again. The second rustler threw up his hands and fell. The remaining 3 rustlers had had enough. They abandoned the stolen cattle and spurred their horses into a desperate gallop, fleeing south toward the open range. Thomas and Ben gave chase for a short distance, then let them go, turning back to secure the herd and check on the fallen rustlers. Cole and Eleanor scrambled down from the ridge and rode to join them. The rustler leader was dead, Cole's shot having taken him through the heart. The second man was wounded but alive, conscious enough to be moaning in pain. Thomas dismounted and quickly bound the man's wound, then secured his hands. "We will take him to town, let the sheriff deal with him," Thomas said. He looked at Eleanor and Cole, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his weathered face. "That was damn fine shooting, Cole, and damn fine spotting, Eleanor. You two make quite a team." Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Her father was proud of her again, respected her again, and it was because of the partnership she had formed with Cole. She looked at the man who had offered to be her aim and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. There was admiration in his eyes, yes, but also something deeper, something that spoke of connection and understanding and the beginning of feelings that went beyond mere partnership. The ride back to the ranch was triumphant. They delivered the wounded rustler to the sheriff in Rawlins the next day, and word spread quickly about how Eleanor Hartford and the new hand had stopped a major rustling operation. People talked about it in the saloons and the general store, and the story grew with each telling. But through it all, Eleanor and Cole remained grounded, focused on the work that needed to be done. As summer turned to autumn and the aspen trees in the high country blazed gold and red, Eleanor and Cole spent more and more time together. They rode out to check the herds, and Cole would ask her about the land, about the cattle, about the 100 small details that made the difference between a ranch that prospered and one that failed. Eleanor found herself opening up to him in ways she had never opened up to anyone, telling him about her childhood, about her mother's death, about the loneliness of being a woman in a man's world and the constant need to prove herself. Cole listened more than he talked, but when he did share, his words were thoughtful and genuine. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about losing his own mother to pneumonia when he was 16, about the wandering years when he had drifted from ranch to ranch, never quite finding a place that felt like home. There was a loneliness in him that matched her own, Eleanor realized, a sense of being adrift in the world, searching for belonging. One evening in October, they were riding back from the high pasture as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. For a while, then Cole spoke. "I want to for a while." Then Cole spoke. "I want to tell you something," he said, his voice quiet but intense. Eleanor looked at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "What is it?" "When I came here in July, I was looking for work, yes, but I was also looking for something else, though I did not know what. I had been feeling for a long time like I was just going through the motions, working but not living, surviving but not thriving. Then I met you, and everything changed." He paused, and Eleanor waited, hardly daring to breathe. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," Cole continued. "Not because you can shoot straight or ride hard or do all the things that men respect. You are strong because you faced something that would have destroyed most people, and instead of giving up, you found a way to keep going. You adapted, you transformed, and you let me be part of that transformation. Working with you these past months has been the best thing that has ever happened to me." Eleanor felt tears prickling at her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Cole, I love you, Eleanor," Cole said simply, turning in his saddle to face her fully. "I have loved you since that first day when you showed me that courage is not about never being afraid or never being broken. It is about what you do after you are broken, how you rebuild, how you keep going. I love your intelligence, your determination, your fierce heart. I love that you never gave up on yourself, even when it would have been easy to do so. And I would be honored, more honored than I can say, if you would let me be more than just your aim, if you would let me be your partner in all things for the rest of our lives." Eleanor's mare had stopped walking, sensing the importance of the moment. Eleanor sat very still, her shaking hands gripping the reins, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had thought love was lost to her, that no man would want a woman who was damaged, diminished, less than whole. But Cole did not see her that way. He saw her as she truly was, in all her complexity. And he loved her not despite her struggles, but because of how she had faced them. "I love you too," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I have loved you since that first day, when you offered not to save me or fix me, but to work with me. When you saw me as an equal, as someone worth partnering with. You gave me back my purpose, my pride, my sense of self. You gave me back my life. And yes, Cole Garrett, I will be your partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live. Cole dismounted and came to stand beside her horse, reaching up to help her down. When her feet touched the ground, he pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the fading light, holding each other as if they would never let go. Then Cole tilted her face up to his and kissed her, and it was like coming home, like finding the missing piece that made everything complete. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Rawlins. Thomas Hartford gave his daughter away. Thomas Hartford gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes, and the church was filled with ranch hands, neighbors, and townspeople who had known Eleanor her whole life and were overjoyed to see her so radiantly happy. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the ranch, with a feast and music and dancing that lasted long into the night. Eleanor and Cole danced together, and though Eleanor's hands shook as she rested them on Cole's shoulders, it did not matter. They moved together as they did everything else, as partners, each compensating for the other's weaknesses, each magnifying the other's strengths. That night, in the privacy of their room, Cole undressed Eleanor slowly, reverently, his hands gentle on her skin. He kissed every part of her, murmuring words of love and devotion. And when they finally came together, it was with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Eleanor's head on Cole's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I could be this happy," Eleanor whispered. "I thought that fall had taken everything from me." "It did not take everything," Cole said, running his fingers through her hair. "It took your steady hands, yes, but it could not take your courage, your intelligence, your heart. Those things are still yours, and they always will be. And now, so am I." Winter came to Wyoming Territory with a vengeance that year, bringing snow and bitter cold that locked the land in ice. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and love and the quiet contentment of two people who had found each other against all odds. Cole continued to work the ranch alongside Thomas and the other hands, and Eleanor continued to guide him, to be his eyes and his tactical mind whenever shooting or strategy was required. But their partnership extended far beyond that. They planned for the future, talking late into the night about how to expand the ranch, which breeding stock to purchase, where to build new fencing. Eleanor kept the books, tracking expenses and income with meticulous care, and Cole respected her judgment absolutely, never questioning her decisions or trying to override her authority. They were true partners in every sense, each bringing different strengths to the relationship, each valuing what the other contributed. In the spring of 1879, they received word that another band of rustlers was operating in the territory, hitting ranches throughout Carbon County. The sheriff organized a group of ranchers and hands to track them down, and Cole volunteered to join. Eleanor wanted to go too, but she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, and both Cole and Thomas insisted she stay behind. "I do not like this," Eleanor said as Cole prepared to leave. Her hands were shaking more than usual, anxiety making the tremors worse. "These men are dangerous." "I know," Cole said, checking his weapons and supplies. "But we cannot let them terrorize the county. Someone has to stand up to them." "Then promise me you will be careful," Eleanor said, gripping his arm with her trembling hands. "Promise me you will come back to me, to us." Cole covered her hands with his own, stilling the tremors through the firmness of his touch. "I promise. I have everything to live for now. I am not taking any foolish risks. We will track them, we will stop them, and I will come home to you." He kissed her deeply, his hand resting gently on the swell of her belly where their child grew. Then he mounted his horse and rode out with the posse, and Eleanor watched him go with her heart in her throat. The posse was gone for 8 days, 8 long days during which Eleanor could not eat or sleep properly, consumed with worry. She tried to keep busy, throwing herself into ranch work, but her mind kept drifting to Cole, imagining all the terrible things that could happen. Her father tried to comfort her, but Thomas was worried too, and his reassurances rang hollow. On the 9th day, Eleanor was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She dropped the knife she had been using and ran to the window, her heart pounding. A group of riders was coming up the road, and as they drew closer, Eleanor could see Cole at the front, sitting tall and straight in his saddle, unharmed. She ran out of the house, not caring that she was not wearing a coat despite the cool spring air, not caring about anything except that Cole was home and safe. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and caught Eleanor in his arms, holding her tight. "It is over," he said into her hair. "We caught them. They are in custody, and they will hang for their crimes. It is over, and I am home." Eleanor clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "I was so scared. I thought—" "I know," Cole said softly. "I was scared too, but I kept my promise. I came back to you." The posse had successfully tracked the rustlers to a hideout in the Medicine Bow Mountains, and after a brief shootout, had captured all 6 of them. One of the posse members had been wounded, but he would recover. The rustlers were taken to Laramie to stand trial, and the territorial judge wasted no time in convicting them. 3 were hanged, and the others were sentenced to long prison terms. The rustling problem that had plagued Carbon County for over a year was finally ended. In June of 1879, Eleanor gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when the midwife feared for both mother and child, but Eleanor was strong and determined, and she pushed through the pain with fierce resolve. When the baby finally emerged, red-faced and squalling, Cole wept openly, holding his son for the first time, with hands that trembled almost as much as Eleanor's. They named him Thomas Cole Garrett, after both grandfathers, but they called him Tommy. He was a healthy, vigorous baby with his mother's hazel eyes and his father's strong build. Cole was a devoted father from the first moment, getting up in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending every free moment with his son. Eleanor recovered from the birth slowly but steadily, and by late summer, she was back to helping run the ranch, though now with a baby on her hip or sleeping in a cradle nearby. She had never been happier. Her hands still shook, and they always would, but it no longer defined her. She was so much more than her steady aim, or lack thereof. She was a wife, a mother, a rancher, a strategist, a partner. She was whole. In the autumn of that year, Thomas Hartford announced that he was officially making Cole his partner in the ranch. "You have more than earned it," he told Cole over dinner one night. "You have worked harder than any hand I have ever had. You have proven your loyalty a dozen times over, and most importantly, you have made my daughter happier than I have ever seen her. The Hartford spread will be the Hartford-Garrett spread from now on, and when I am gone, it will be yours and Eleanor's." Cole was humbled and honored, and he shook his father-in-law's hand with genuine gratitude. "I will not let you down, sir. I swear it." "You never have," Thomas said gruffly, his eyes suspiciously bright. The years rolled by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. There were good years and bad years, harsh winters and mild ones, cattle that prospered and cattle that sickened. But through it all, Eleanor and Cole faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing season. In 1881, Eleanor gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose after Eleanor's mother. Rose was smaller and more delicate than her brother, but she had her mother's fierce determination from the start. Cole doted on his daughter, and Eleanor teased him about being wrapped around the little girl's finger. In 1883, Thomas Hartford died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 67. He had lived to see his grandson turn 4 and his granddaughter turn 2, and he had died knowing that his ranch was in good hands, that his daughter was loved and cherished, and that the Hartford legacy would continue. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple marker that read, "Thomas Hartford, 1816 to 1883, a good man and a true friend." Eleanor grieved deeply for her father, but she also took comfort in knowing that he had approved of Cole, that he had seen them as true partners, that he had died proud of everything they had built together. Cole supported her through her grief with the same steady presence he brought to everything, and gradually, the sharpness of the loss faded to a bearable ache. The ranch continued to prosper under Cole and Eleanor's management. They expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and built a reputation for producing some of the finest cattle in Wyoming Territory. In 1890, when Wyoming became a state, they celebrated by hosting a huge party at the ranch, inviting neighbors from miles around to share in the joy of statehood. By then, Tommy was 11 years old and already working alongside his father, learning the skills of ranching and riding and roping. Rose was 9, and though she was smaller and more bookish than her brother, she had her mother's sharp mind and her father's steady temperament. Eleanor had begun teaching both children to read and write and do arithmetic, determined that they would have the education she had cobbled together on her own. In 1892, Eleanor gave birth to a third child, another son they named Daniel. He was a surprise, coming 13 years after Tommy and 10 years after Rose, but he was a welcome addition to the family. Tommy and Rose doted on their baby brother, and Cole was just as attentive a father at 39 as he had been at 28. As the years passed, Eleanor's tremors neither improved nor worsened significantly. They were simply part of her, as much a feature as her hazel eyes or her dark hair, which was now beginning to show threads of silver. She had long since stopped thinking of herself as broken or damaged. She was simply Eleanor, with all her strengths and weaknesses, loved and valued for exactly who she was. Cole aged well, his weathered face gaining new lines, but his gray eyes remaining clear and keen. He had put on a bit of weight over the years, the lean ranginess of his youth giving way to a more solid, settled build. But he was still strong and capable. Most importantly, his love for Eleanor had never wavered. If anything, it had deepened with time, growing from the passionate intensity of new love into something richer and more complex. A love built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the thousand small kindnesses that made up a life together. They still worked as a team whenever shooting was required, though as the years went by and law and order came more fully to Wyoming, such situations became increasingly rare. But the partnership they had forged that first summer extended into every aspect of their lives. They made decisions together, planned for the future together, raised their children together. They were not just husband and wife. They were best friends, confidants, true partners in every sense of the word. In 1895, when Eleanor was 40 years old and Cole was 42, they decided to take a trip. They had never had a real honeymoon, too busy with the demands of the ranch and then with raising children. But now Tommy was 16 and responsible enough to manage the ranch for a few weeks with the help of the hands. So Eleanor and Cole took the train to Denver and from there to San Francisco. It was Eleanor's first time seeing the ocean, and she stood on the beach with tears streaming down her face, overcome by the vastness and beauty of it. Cole stood beside her, his arm around her waist, and they watched the sun set over the Pacific in a blaze of gold and crimson that seemed to set the sky on fire. "Thank you," Eleanor said quietly. "For what?" Cole asked. "For giving me back my life," Eleanor said, turning to look at him. "For seeing me not as I was, but as I could be. For loving me enough to be patient while I figured out who I was going to be after the accident. For being my aim when I needed you to be, and my partner always." Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "You did the hard work, Eleanor. You were the one who refused to give up, who kept fighting, who found a new way to be yourself. I just walked beside you, and I would do it again, 1,000 times over, because you were the best thing that ever happened to me." They kissed there on the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon, and it was as sweet and full of promise as their first kiss had been nearly 17 years before. They returned to Wyoming renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever the future held. Tommy grew into a fine young man, strong and capable like his father, intelligent and strategic like his mother. He married at 22, a smart, practical young woman named Sarah, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They gave Eleanor and Cole their first grandchild in 1902, a little girl named Eleanor after her grandmother. Rose proved to be a brilliant student, and when she turned 18, she announced that she wanted to become a teacher. Eleanor and Cole supported her decision wholeheartedly, and they sent her to the normal school in Laramie. She graduated with honors and took a position teaching in Rawlins, where she met and fell in love with a young lawyer named James Mitchell. They married in 1903, and Rose continued teaching until the birth of her first child in 1904. Daniel, the baby, proved to have a gift for working with horses. By the time he was 15, he could gentle the wildest Mustang and train it to saddle in half the time it took anyone else. He had his father's quiet patience and his mother's keen eye, and ranchers from all over the county began bringing their horses to the Hartford Garrett Ranch for Daniel to train. As the new century turned and the old frontier ways began to fade, Eleanor and Cole adapted as they had always adapted. They purchased some of the new machinery that was becoming available, making ranch work somewhat easier. They built a larger, more modern house, though they kept the old ranch house as well, using it for storage and sometimes for visiting grandchildren who wanted to pretend they were pioneers. In 1908, when Eleanor was 53 and Cole was 55, they sat together on the porch of their home on a warm summer evening, watching the sun set over the same land they had been watching for 3 decades. Tommy was running the day-to-day operations of the ranch now, though he still consulted with his parents on major decisions. Rose was happily married with 3 children. Daniel, at 16, was becoming known as one of the best horse trainers in Wyoming. "Can you believe we have been married for 29 years?" Eleanor asked, her hand resting in Cole's, her fingers still trembling slightly but his grip steady and sure. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Cole said. "And sometimes it feels like we have always been together, like there was never a time when you were not part of my life." "Do you have any regrets?" Eleanor asked. Cole was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "No," he finally said, "not one. My life has been exactly what I wanted it to be because you have been in it. What about you? Do you regret anything?" Eleanor thought about the question, about the accident that had changed her life so dramatically, about all the struggles and challenges they had faced over the years. "I regret the accident, of course," she said slowly. "I regret that I cannot hold our grandchildren without my hands shaking. I regret that I never got to shoot competitively again. But I do not regret what came after. I do not regret meeting you, marrying you, building this life with you. The accident took something from me, but it also gave me something. It gave me you, and that trade, as terrible as it seemed at the time, was worth it." Cole lifted her trembling hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. I have loved you from the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They sat together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, comfortable in the silence, content in each other's presence. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership founded on mutual respect, deepened by shared struggle, and sustained by abiding love. They had raised children who were happy and successful. They had built a ranch that was prosperous and respected. They had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. In 1910, they celebrated their 30th anniversary with a party that brought together family and friends from across the state. There were speeches and toasts, and Tommy stood up to say a few words about his parents. "My mother and father have taught me many things over the years," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. "They taught me how to work hard, how to treat people fairly, how to build something that lasts. But most importantly, they taught me what real partnership looks like. They taught me that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day. It is showing up for each other, supporting each other, being willing to adapt and change and grow together. My parents have been doing that for 30 years, and their love is as strong today as it was the day they married. I am honored to be their son, and I can only hope that my own marriage will be half as successful as theirs has been." There was not a dry eye in the house when Tommy finished, and Eleanor and Cole held each other tightly, overwhelmed by the love and respect of their family and community. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new sorrows as they always did. In 1915, Eleanor and Cole became great-grandparents when Tommy and Sarah's daughter Eleanor had a son of her own. They held the tiny baby in their arms, marveling at the continuation of the family line, at the thought that this child would carry their legacy into the future. In 1918, the world was turned upside down by the Great War raging in Europe and the influenza pandemic that swept across the globe. Wyoming was not spared, and the family held its collective breath as the disease ravaged communities across the state. But fortune smiled on them, and all of the Hartford Garretts survived, though many of their neighbors and friends were not so lucky. By 1920, Eleanor was 65 and Cole was 67. They had both slowed down considerably, no longer able to do the hard physical work of ranching, but their minds were still sharp and their love still strong. They spent their days sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren and great-grandchildren play in the yard, telling stories of the old days when Wyoming was still a territory and the frontier was still wild. "Do you remember that first day?" Eleanor asked one afternoon, her trembling hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "When you rode up to the ranch looking for work?" "I remember everything about that day," Cole said, his own hands, now gnarled with arthritis but still steadier than hers, holding his own cup. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even though you looked so sad. I remember the way your hands shook when you held them out to show me. I remember thinking that I wanted to help you, to ease that sadness somehow." "And you did," Eleanor said softly. "You gave me back my purpose, my pride, my life. And you gave me something I never thought I would have. You gave me love, real love, the kind that lasts and endures and survives everything life throws at it. We gave that to each other, Cole corrected gently. Partnership, remember? We have always been partners, right from the start. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun track across the sky. The ranch was thriving under Tommy's management, expanded now to over 5,000 acres, and running more than 2,000 head of cattle. The Hartford Garrett name was known and respected throughout Wyoming and beyond. Their children were happy and successful. Their grandchildren were growing into fine young people, and their great-grandchildren were the promise of the future. In 1923, Cole suffered a heart attack. It was not severe enough to kill him, but it was a warning that time was running out. Eleanor nursed him back to health with fierce determination, the same determination she had shown in rebuilding her own life after her accident. Cole recovered, but he was frailer now, his energy limited, his strength diminished. "I am not ready to leave you," Cole said one night as they lay together in their bed, Eleanor's head on his shoulder, as it had been for 44 years. "Then do not leave," Eleanor said fiercely, her voice muffled against his chest. "Stay with me. We still have time. We still have more life to live together." "I will stay as long as I can," Cole promised. "But when my time comes, I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Eleanor said. "Promise me you will not stop living," Cole said. "Promise me you will keep being you, fierce and strong and full of life. Promise me you will watch our grandchildren grow and our great-grandchildren thrive. Promise me you will sit on this porch and watch the sunsets and remember all the good times we had together. Promise me you will live, Eleanor, really live, until it is your time to come and find me again." Eleanor was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, but you have to promise me something too." "What?" Cole asked, his own eyes wet. "Promise me that when we meet again, wherever we go after this life, your first words to me will be the same words you said that first day. Promise me, you will say, 'Then I will be your aim.'" Cole pulled her closer, holding her as tightly as his weakened body would allow. "I promise, in this life and the next, I will always be your aim, and you will always be my purpose." Cole lived for 2 more years after his heart attack, 2 precious years during which he and Eleanor savored every moment together. They celebrated their 45th anniversary in 1924, surrounded by 4 generations of their family. Cole held his wife's trembling hand and told her, as he had told her countless times before, that she was the love of his life and his greatest adventure. In the spring of 1925, Cole caught pneumonia. Despite Eleanor's devoted care and the best efforts of the doctor, he did not recover. He died on a warm May morning, with Eleanor holding his hand and their children and grandchildren gathered around his bed. His last words were, "I love you, Eleanor, always and forever." Eleanor was 70 years old when Cole died, and for a time, the family feared that she would die of grief, that she would simply give up and follow her husband into death. But Eleanor had made a promise, and she kept it. She mourned deeply, crying until she had no more tears, but she did not stop living. She continued to sit on the porch and watch the sunsets. She continued to hold her great-grandchildren and tell them stories of the old days. She continued to advise Tommy on ranch matters, her mind still sharp even as her body grew more frail. She lived for 5 more years after Cole's death, years that were bittersweet, filled with the joy of watching her family grow, but marked always by the absence of the man who had been her partner, her love, her other half. She spoke of him often, telling stories to anyone who would listen about the cowboy who had offered to be her aim, and had ended up being so much more. On a crisp October morning in 1930, Eleanor woke feeling strange, as if something fundamental had shifted in the world. She rose and dressed carefully, then walked out to the cemetery on the hill where Cole was buried. She stood beside his grave for a long time, her hands trembling as they had for 52 years since that terrible fall that had changed her life. "I kept my promise," she said aloud, her voice carrying on the wind. "I lived, Cole. I really lived. But I am so tired now, and I miss you so much. I think it is time for me to come home." She walked back to the house and sat in her favorite chair on the porch, looking out over the land she and Cole had built together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Eleanor watched it with a sense of peace and completion. As the last rays of sunlight faded, she closed her eyes and let herself drift. They found her the next morning, still sitting in her chair, a slight smile on her face. Eleanor Hartford Garrett had died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, finally reunited with the man who had been her aim, her partner, and her truest love. They buried her beside Cole on the hill overlooking the ranch, and the entire county turned out for the funeral. People spoke of her strength, her intelligence, her fierce determination. They spoke of the partnership she had forged with Cole, a partnership that had become legendary in Wyoming, a model of what two people could accomplish when they truly worked together, when they saw each other as equals, when they chose love and respect and partnership over pride and ego. The Hartford Garrett Ranch continued to thrive under Tommy's management, and eventually under the management of his children and grandchildren. The story of Eleanor and Cole became part of the family legacy, passed down through the generations, a reminder that true love is not about two perfect people finding each other, but about two imperfect people who choose to build something beautiful together. In the family Bible, preserved and protected, was an entry in Eleanor's own shaky handwriting, written on the day she and Cole married. Face it together, as partners, as friends, 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 as face it together, as partners, as friends, as lovers. He is my steady hand, and I am his guiding eye, and together we are complete. And beneath that, in Cole's firm, clear script, he had added, Eleanor Hartford is the bravest person I have ever known. She taught me that strength is not about never falling, but about how you rise after you fall. She is my partner, my love, my home. I will be her aim for as long as I draw breath, and in whatever comes after. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch, now a sprawling operation that encompasses 10,000 acres. When visitors ask about the history of the place, they are always told the story of Eleanor and Cole, of the woman whose hands shook too much to shoot anymore, and the cowboy who offered to be her aim. It is a story of love and partnership, of overcoming adversity, of finding strength in vulnerability and hope in despair. On the hill overlooking the ranch, two headstones stand side by side. One reads, Eleanor Hartford Garrett, 1855 to 1930, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, her aim was true. The other reads, Cole Garrett, 1851 to 1925, beloved husband, father, grandfather, he stood steady. Between the two headstones, carved into a flat stone set into the ground, are the words that define their relationship and their love. Partners in all things, now and forever. The wind blows across the Wyoming plains as it has for thousands of years, carrying the scent of sage and grass and cattle. The sun rises and sets over the Hartford Garrett Ranch, marking the passage of days and seasons and years. And somewhere in the great beyond, Eleanor and Cole are together again, her hand in his, steady and sure, walking into eternity side by side, partners still and always. Their love, a testament to the enduring power of connection, respect, and the choice to see each other not as broken or diminished, but as complete and whole and exactly enough. Their story is not just a story of the Old West, of cowboys and ranches and frontier justice. It is a story that transcends time and place, a reminder that the greatest adventures are not about conquering territory or defeating enemies, but about finding someone who sees you for who you truly are and loves you, not despite your flaws, but because of your humanity. It is a story about the courage to be vulnerable, the wisdom to ask for help, the grace to accept it, and the transformative power of genuine partnership. In the end, Cole did not save Eleanor, and Eleanor did not save Cole. They saved each other, each offering what the other needed most: respect, understanding, patience, and love. Eleanor's trembling hands never steadied, but they stopped mattering because Cole was there to be her aim, and together they hit every target that mattered. They built a life, raised a family, created a legacy, and loved each other with a depth and constancy that few people ever experience. And that, in the end, is what the story of Eleanor Hartford and Cole Garrett teaches us. That love is not about finding someone who completes us, but about finding someone who helps us become more fully ourselves. It is about partnership and respect, and the daily choice to show up for each other, through sickness and health, through triumph and tragedy, through the trembling uncertainty of difficult times, and the steady certainty of good times. Their love story began with a simple offer: then I will be your aim. But it became so much more than that. It became a promise kept, a partnership honored, a love story for the ages. And though Eleanor and Cole have been gone for nearly a century now, their story lives on, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, a reminder that the greatest love stories are not about grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but about two people who choose each other, day after day, year after year, until death finally parts them, and they cross over to be reunited once more. The ranch still stands, a living monument to their love and their partnership. The cattle still graze the same hills where Eleanor and Cole rode together all those years ago. The sun still sets in blazing glory over the Wind River Range, painting the sky in colors that seem almost too beautiful to be real. And in the hearts of their descendants, the memory of their great-great-grandparents' love still burns bright, a guiding light and an inspiration. This is the story of Eleanor Hartford and Cole Garrett, of trembling hands and steady aim, of loss transformed into gain, of weakness becoming strength through partnership and love. This is the story of how a terrible accident became the catalyst for the greatest love story the Wyoming frontier ever knew. This is the story of two souls who found each other in the wild heart of the American West and built something that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy of love, partnership, and the unshakable belief that two people working together can accomplish anything, overcome anything, survive anything, as long as they face it side by side. And so, their story ends, as all stories must, but also as the best stories do, with love triumphant, with promises kept, with a life fully lived, and a legacy that will never die. Eleanor's hands may have shaken, but her aim, guided by Cole's steady presence, was always true. And Cole's promise, made on a dusty July day in 1878, was kept until his last breath and beyond. He was her aim, her partner, her love, in this life and in whatever comes after, the end.